Hey friends, Mark here. Just want to give a quick pre-show note on the episode you're about to hear. I In this episode I talk about a lot about the aggressive and insane media targeting of the Utah Jazz and their resting maneuvers and everything for that has not been different from any other team over the past few years and taking measures and all that kind of thing, and how the media attention is grossly out of control and disproportionate. And one of the things I mentioned was that as I feared, that this disproportionate media attention would lead to disproportionate league attention and league punishment on the Jazz for something that other teams have done. And lo and behold, that is what actually came to pass. So after I recorded this episode you're about to hear, the NBA did issue its largest fine to the Utah Jazz that they have done, $500,000. I think I say in this episode they fined them $1 million last year. That was wrong. It's $100,000 last year, but now it's $500,000 for resting Lowry and Jaren Jackson in the fourth quarter of the past weekend's games. Like I said, this is something I feared would happen, and it just does not make sense with how other teams have operated in the past. There were Tony Jones mentioned on the radio that perhaps it was Sam Presti making noises and rumblings around the league back channels as well, making his issues known. Obviously, the Thunder own the Jazz's pick if it falls outside of the top 8. And I just wanted to mention that ahead of time, that what you're about to hear is still relevant and everything, but it actually does involve that the latest news is that there is a punishment of the $500,000. So congrats to the league. You've now incentivized the Jazz to just make up injuries and not play these players at all. So instead of actually putting them on the court and seeing what happens. So we're just going to get more ridiculous and aggressive from here. There was no warning to the Jazz about this. There was no prefatory, hey, knock it off or we'll fine you. It seems like this was pretty arbitrary and capricious as to where the league drew the line, and perhaps it was the outsized media attention and maybe some Sam Presti back channels kind of causing this. So this is kind of a negative, aggressive episode. I got pretty fun and feisty on this one, so I think it's a fun listen. I hope you enjoy the episode. Just want to give a quick note on the news ahead of time. So enjoy the episode. Please sound off in the comments wherever you're listening, or hit me up on Blue Sky personally or the Salt City Hoops account on Twitter, and we'll get after you. Thank you. Enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? It's time for another Salt City Hoops podcast with me, Mark Russell Pereira, here to get after you with everything going on with the Utah Jazz and the NBA. And boy, does it feel like it's a weird time to be a Utah Jazz fan right now. With it seems like everyone in the NBA has all eyes on whatever the heck Utah's doing and what are they doing with their roster and why are they making these trades. And as we get into the All-Star break, it really just feels like the entire NBA needs a break, because everyone just feels so angsty and angry, and this entire concept of tanking and how do you fix tanking, whatever, just feels like an exhaustive thing that we talk about every single year. And then the more that the Reds spotlight gets targeted directly at the Jazz and seemingly no other team, it makes me angrier and angrier, and I felt like I at least need to address it. And I feel like George Costanza in the Driving to Long Island scene, where he says, you want to get weird? Let's get weird, right? And it's like, all right, you want to get some thoughts out there? We're going to. And I try to limit how much swearing I drop on the podcast, because it affects the robot ears of the algorithm detect it, and I like it. I do the show for you guys and for me, just have some fun. This is a labor of love, but I also like more fans to find it and everything, so I try not to be too aggressive on some things. But man, I found myself saying F off, although with the actual word, of course, about 5,000 times over the past 4 days. This is not 5 days since Saturday. So this is Thursday. This is before our Portland game tonight. Recording this in the afternoon before that Portland game. We just beat the Kings last night, and we had a pair of games against the Miami Heat and Orlando Magic over the weekend. So it's since last weekend that I have these annoying thoughts that I just feel like the entire NBA is being just so incredibly disingenuous, both on the concept of tanking as a whole, but also this weird targeting of the Utah Jazz. First of all, I felt like there has just been some weird targeting of the Utah Jazz when it came to trading Lauri Markkanen. And I think the Milwaukee Bucks experienced this to some degree with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I'm not saying Utah is the only team that has done this, but it felt like over the past few years that the regular NBA sphere was apoplectic or absolutely flabbergasted that Utah wouldn't trade Lauri Markkanen for 3 first-round picks or whatever. And why would you keep him around? And, Zach Lowe he mentioned it every single time he brought up the Jazz. It was, we don't know what they're doing with Lauri Markkanen. And it's like the plan was pretty much spelled out for. It was only one time that Tim McMahon gave some pushback on that on one episode. And now coming to here with yet another year of NBA and tanking, that the Utah Jazz are somehow worse than any other team, that they're breaking novel territory. So I want to get into that. First, this is Thursday afternoon, so we do have news this morning that Jaren Jackson Jr. will be out for the remainder of the season. And before you get your tanking jokes off, that of course the Jazz win 2 games in a row against the worst team in the NBA that the Jazz had no chance of losing to, by the way. Beat the Sacramento Kings last night in a blowout. The Jazz had no chance of winning that game, or losing that game, I should say. Even if the Jazz played their 5 worst players, the Kings are playing way, 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 way worse players. DeMar DeRozan was playing for the Kings, but he was a listless, just zero chance of losing the game. So, of course, and then the Jazz, quote-unquote, accidentally beat the Miami Heat on Sunday, I think it was. And so the Jazz win 2 games in a row in a season where they're trying to keep their top 8 protected pick. And, of course they shut Jaren Jackson Jr. down. He's out for the season. Well, let's get some facts a little bit right here. So Jaren Jackson Jr. has, speaking densely and more reductive, he has a small mass in his knee. It is correctly medically identified as a tumor, but it's when we hear the big T word, that can be scary. It is. I'm pulling up a tweet here from Jesse Morse, who likes to distribute specific information about the injuries that we see in sports, and it is called tenosynovial giant cell tumor, TGCT. The phrase used in the media report was PVNS, which is pigmented villonodular synovitis of the knee. So, excuse my pronunciation there. So PVNS, and basically it's just a small mass. It's a discrete mass that can be surgically removed. If you don't surgically remove it, maybe it gets a little bit bigger, but it's going to cause knee pain as you don't treat it. It needs to be surgically removed. And arthroscopic surgery, I've had a couple in my knee. They are invasive procedures, but they're minimally invasive. Like, you definitely are going to get some knee swelling for a couple weeks. Usually it's a 4 to 6 week thing. You've seen people get arthroscopic surgeries in the playoffs and come back in like a week. I think that's kind of crazy, but especially as arthroscopic surgeries get smaller and smaller and with tinier and tinier tools to make it less and less invasive. We don't know the size of this mass in Jaren Jackson Jr.'s knee. I don't need to get all medically into it. It's just he needs surgery. He needed arthroscopic surgery on his knee. It's a minor surgery, but it's a surgery. So it needed to happen. 2 things about this. 1, if the Jazz were competing and headed for the playoffs, he would have waited until the offseason to get this surgery. 2, he needs to get the surgery. Like, this isn't something you just kind of deal with. He can deal with it in the short term. So this would have been identified, maybe not in the actual physical, but he gets his MRI after the trade. They identify it, and it's not something that like nullifies or trade or something from a physical. You just say, hey, okay, this is what it is. How do you feel? And he's probably looking at the Jazz saying, actually, I don't feel any pain at all. That's news to me. Maybe I felt a little discomfort occasionally, but let me practice with the team. Let me play a home game for the Jazz and get out there and play some minutes. Let me practice with the team a little bit. Let me do a couple 2-man actions with Lauri Markkanen. Let's see how this looks. And then I'll get the surgery. I think that's entirely approachable and acceptable. And if the Jazz didn't just trade for him, we wouldn't think anything of it. We'd be like, like if this happened to Lauri Markkanen, it'd been like, oh, well, he needs the surgery. I guess we might as well do it now. So the timing is always going to, get your jokes off. I know no one's besides the people listening to this show and the people who actually give a crap about the nuance of things, which is a smaller and smaller amount of people these days in all disciplines. They're not going to care. They're going to see the jokes. Jazz win 2 in a row. Oh, got a tank. Shut down Jaren Jackson Jr. But this isn't like, oh, he hurt his pinky toe with a hangnail, and so we're going to keep him out for 2 months. This isn't like Trae Young, who's had a sore quad for 93 years. And by me saying that, I don't give a shit if Trae Young plays. I really don't. The Wizards also should keep their top 8 protected pick, and they should do whatever they need to do that. But this is an actual discrete injury that needed to be addressed. And yes, he could have played through it, but this is also not something you can not address. So I'm thankful that the nuance here is a little bit more objective, because if he had Jaren Jackson Jr. has had actual toe issues. I'm forgetting the specifics of that right now. I believe he got surgery last offseason to address a toe matter. And if he was actually out because of, he played through half the season and his toe is now starting to hurt again, I'd actually be concerned that this is some sort of degenerative or something that's going to be an issue for 4 or 5 years. Like Darius Garland, part of the issue that LA has to deal with is his toes just seemingly aren't getting better and he's just fighting through it. It's like, oh man, I need to do something about that. So anyway, he's going to be out for the rest of the year. He'll be healthy. He'll be around the team. Might be out a couple weeks from the bench while he gets surgery. Of course, this is the All-Star break. He might even be back on the bench by the time the Jazz start playing again next week. So he's out for the year. He looked great those 3 games. 3 straight games of 20-plus points. I love the fact that he's a complimentary offensive player. He's never going to be asked to be the guy. The Jazz offense will always need him to do some isolation possessions from time to time, because I think any good NBA team needs some minutes, some shot soakers and minute soakers on their team, and Jaren Jackson Jr.'s isolation numbers are pretty acceptable from that perspective, kind of like the give and take of Jordan Clarkson back in the day. You can give and take Jaren Jackson Jr.'s offense, to say nothing about his defense, but his offense is something that, if that's a complementary piece on your starting 5, that's a really good offensive piece. If you're asking Jaren Jackson Jr. to be your best offensive player, you're in big trouble. So with the vertical aspects that Walker Kessler gives you in the front court, with Lauri Markkanen's Lauri marketing, and with Keontae George's ascendance, and with Ace Bailey being a 6'8" starting shooting guard with positive 3-point percentage that can also have a little bit of an isolation and mid-range game, this is an offense that has many pieces that isn't relying on Jaren Jackson Jr., and we saw him succeed as a complementary piece, scoring 20-plus points in each of his 3 games. Love it. He looks great. He and Markkanen are out there, and when they were playing with Nurkic, you can just see the size advantage, and as far as the rebounds per game, you could see Jaren Jackson Jr. I loved the way he was occupying space, and the Jazz didn't struggle from a rebounding perspective because he was out there, even if he's not actually getting the rebounds. He's not boxing guys out Brook Lopez style. We're going to have to watch this more to see, and I'm sure there's been Memphis breakdowns and other great podcasters or video people who have broken down his rebounding thing. So, but watching it didn't strike me as this guy is low effort and weak or whatever. It felt like he could be a part of some positive defensive rebounding teams, especially because while Lauri Markkanen is a below average rebounder, he's going to be a positive rebounder at his position at the 3, and Walker Kessler is an average defensive rebounder at center, but is an overwhelming offensive rebounder. And Ace Bailey's a very positive rebounder at the 2, and I don't think you need Russell Westbrook at the 1 to be a positive rebounding team with that lineup. So, and it's also worth it. It's not, that's just the starting lineup. We'll see how Triple J plays with everyone else. Anyway, he's great. Shut down for the season for an actual surgery, an actual injury. He doesn't have a sore hangnail. It's just something that on a competitive team, he would have gotten the surgery in the offseason. So get your jokes off now, regular media. So, Jazz and tanking. The fervor over the weekend started with the Orlando Magic game when the Jazz were up 15 or 17 late in the third. and then they didn't play any of the relevant players for the rest of the game. Keontae George, he sprained his ankle in the first half, so he didn't return. But aside from that, Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't play in the fourth quarter. Lauri Markkanen didn't play in the fourth quarter. Yusuf Nurkic didn't play in the fourth quarter. So the Jazz were playing their entire bench lineup for the entire fourth quarter, and they blew the lead and lost the game. They did the same thing against Miami and ended up winning the game, although the game was tied going into the fourth quarter, pretty damn close to it. 2-3 point maybe difference, but like the game was very competitive against the Heat, and the Jazz bench actually pulled it out. The concept of benching the players in the starting players in the fourth quarter, everyone was treating like we just discovered the moon for the first time. What is that thing in the sky? Oh my God, what is it? And why are the Jazz doing this? So there's a micro and a macro thing here that the Jazz are being unfairly targeted for. And I'm getting just really annoyed by it. I was going to wash it away, and then like others have noted, we heard the Bobby Marks clip on NBA and ESPN. We're going to play a clip of that later, where all of a sudden, like, I can take random jokes from idiots on Twitter and Blue Sky and whatever, and random people who complain and moan about it. I don't care. But when you start getting national attention on it, it's like, well, now it's going to get into other shows. We're going to get into non-NBA focused shows. Like Bomani Jones is obviously a very he knows every sport pretty much, or at least has a cover knowledge sport information about every sport, and he's going to comment on it. You're going to have people who don't watch the NBA all the time commenting on it, and the story is just going to be about the Jazz. So the macro issue is about tanking. We're going to, in general, why is that such a big deal in the NBA? Why is it such a big deal for the Utah Jazz? Let's get into that later. But the micro issue is the idea of benching the starters in the fourth quarter. Two things here. One, this is not the first time that an NBA team has done this. And just last season, friends, the Toronto Raptors did this. And the only things that came out of that were, did you see what the Raptors did yesterday? Yeah, I guess that was pretty funny, wasn't it? They benched Scotty Barnes for third quarter, fourth quarter. They would bench, RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. And Quickly was kind of hurt a lot of it, but they would bench these players in the second halves and fourth quarters and just lose games. Jacoby Walter, I think, had an amazing, 15-point fourth quarter or something, and had a game winner, I think. Jacoby Walter really had some amazing fourth quarters last year because guess what? The starters were resting in the second half. The Raptors did this just last year, and we can pull a number of examples. I don't know if it's happened all in February or not, but there's definitely been situations where teams have played their starters for the home crowd for a little bit, maybe even just the first quarter, and then bench them the rest of the game. The reason the spotlight all of a sudden was on the Jazz is because both the Magic game and the Heat game were competitive going into the fourth quarter. And the one where the Jazz are winning against the Magic by 17 points. And so you put in your bench lineups and then they lose the game. And the immediate brainwave to think of is, well, the Jazz put out a bunch of overseas useless two-way players, G League talent, and lost the game. They were intentionally trying to lose that game, and they did it by manipulating the game. And the players that the Jazz had out there were their fifth through ninth players, right? Like, these are rotation players. They did not suddenly throw out the basement of their team. Oscar Tshiebwe didn't play 12 minutes, right? They played, it wasn't a good lineup, but they were players that the Jazz rely on night to night and expected them to perform. And they didn't. I don't mean to be dense about it. The Jazz are not unhappy that they lost that game. I'm not trying to say that the tank wasn't on. But they also weren't playing complete dump garbage players. Where I think, and we're going to get into the wider, other ways that teams manipulate things. but this is not the team rolling out 4 players and forfeiting the game. I just don't think it's that entirely crazy for a team who's out of the playoffs to say, look, we are planning for next year. We want Jaren Jackson Jr., our new player, to get some actual NBA burn against the competitive teams in Miami and Orlando. Sacramento doesn't count. Sacramento was just bullshit. But against Miami and Orlando, this is the perfect opportunity for him to get some burn with the starters, with Ace Bailey and Nurkic and Lauri Markkanen. Let's get everyone together and really figure this out. They intended for Keontae to be back against Orlando, and he just had to leave the game. Let's get some actual tape out here to see like what will work against ostensibly good defenses in Miami and Orlando. Very, very small sample size, but get some stuff out there and you have some game tape to work on in the offseason. Like, it's every bit of film does matter. And then we need to figure out who of our first to third year players are worth keeping around this summer. And who might be in the rotation when we're trying to be a top 4 seed in the West next year. So we got a 15-point lead in the fourth. Let's see who holds up. And they sucked against the Magic. Watching it back, Kyle Filipowski needs he needs the All-Star break in the worst way. Played awful against Sacramento too when he got his minutes at the end there. Collier was throwing the ball over the gym. Like the team was poor. To a man, every player was poor in blowing that Magic. There were a couple nice plays, right? Like every quarter you're gonna have some nice plays by some people, but overall it was a disaster. So it was heartening to see them come back in the Miami game, do the same thing. Let's get some game tape with Lowry and Jaren Jackson Jr. together. And the other definitely relevant rotation players like Isaiah Collier and Ace Bailey. And see what they can do in the fourth quarter to preserve that lead or fight back. And on the inverse, I thought Miami played like garbage. I think they shot themselves in the foot a number of times. They were playing without Tyler Hero and Norm Powell, but they had Bam Adebayo. And they have a nice little depth-based team with Khalil Ware and players like Jovic and the rookie Kasper Siaka-Jonas who looked really great. They have like some good depth, and it's on the road. It's in Miami, coached by one of the best coaches of all time. Like this is a real opportunity, and I think Miami shot themselves in the foot. But we saw some real positive stuff from Isaiah Collier, a little goodness from Ace Bailey, a little bit of goodness from Bryce Sensabaugh. I think Filipowski still looked pretty terrible out there. Vince Williams, I'm now coming around to, I love his size out there, acquired from Memphis, right? He looks really good. And they held on to win that game. And as I mentioned, Sacramento, they had no chance of losing that game. The idea of benching the starters in the fourth quarter, like I said, is not new at all. And I have no idea why the attention is suddenly being hoisted upon the Utah Jazz as somehow destroying why people go to the games. And frankly, I would much rather have, as a fan, do you want to see an injury report full, like a 10 deep injury report full of, DNP rest or DNP left knee soreness that's not real, left right elbow soreness, right ear soreness, and you just see a bunch of guys in street clothes? Or would you rather see, hey, Lowry's suiting up tonight, Jaren Jackson's suiting up tonight, Ace Bailey's suiting up, Keontae George is suiting up tonight? Yeah, it's like a preseason game. They're worth the price of admission, those preseason games. You know that you're kind of walking into a preseason game going, it'll be fun if we see some cool basketball, right? They're going to be trying hard. The players on the floor will be absolutely trying hard when they're out there, and we're going to see some cool things. And the game ops will happen, and we'll see the Qualtrics putting, and maybe they'll steal a win, and if they don't win, it's okay. If they don't play in the fourth quarter, I'd prefer them to play in the fourth quarter. But as I understand it, they're actually, they're trying to build for the future here. So maybe winning this game at home against the Oklahoma City Thunder is not the best idea, or the New Orleans Pelicans is not exactly the best idea. It's not, even if you don't even get to that last part of my statement, seeing the guys out there, seeing the stars out there for a half is better than seeing them in street clothes. So I think this is better. That everyone's trying to attribute this to be some secret, dark lair, manipulative, evil plot by the Angels, when the Angels are probably just saying, like, look, we know they're subject to the player participation policy. We're going to put them out there. You can't force us to prioritize development in the fourth quarter here. And if we lose, we lose. That's okay. Where my eye rolling turned into exasperation and F-bombs pretty much started when the Bobby Marks clip started going around. So let me play that for you now, just so you actually hear the indignation in his voice, and so I can respond to it correctly. Will Giannis Antetokounmpo leave the Milwaukee Bucks this season? And who's a paid partner of Kalshi? Giannis Antetokounmpo. You don't think that's affecting the integrity of the I word, Bobby Marks? How is this affecting the integrity of the game? You knew the Jazz are likely going to be prioritizing development. The Jazz are going to be a bad basketball team the rest of the year. We know that going in. We know that them playing their starters for a portion is probably not going to affect how they're going to approach winning and losing various games. We know they're going to be a very bad basketball team. To attribute some sort of aggressive manipulation to this whole thing is preposterous. And for Bobby Marks to suggest that, and others, this is not just him, like there's other national folks who are saying that what the Utah Jazz specifically are doing is some sort of more egregious thing than what other teams are doing. I'll keep using the Trae Young example because it's like, dude's healthy. Dude can play. And I don't give a shit if he plays. I don't care if Vika Zubats for the Pacers, who, as I understand it, just had a new baby. Congratulations, Mr. Zubats, but also has a slightly sprained ankle. I don't give a shit if he doesn't play the rest of the year. Prioritize stuff that's going to happen for your team next year. Where I start to get a little quirky is when, like, and this hasn't happened for Utah or most teams yet, is when you start playing bullshit players. And Utah, except for the occasional Oscar Tshiebwe minutes, which have been a lot more rare than I thought. It feels like every week after the Walker Kessler injury, I keep saying things like, I might see some Oscar Tshiebwe minutes, and we haven't seen it yet. Once you start playing useless G Leaguers, and not just playing them, but playing them obscene amounts of minutes, your two-way guys, these guys who are tank commanders who are not good at basketball, that's when you start being like, well, this team is super not giving a shit. And it's not, you can talk about the starters and the stars all you want to, but if you're not playing your like players who have played the prior 60, 65 games in a regular rotation role, if they are not the next man up playing 30 minutes a game and they too are still just playing their 50-minute a night role, if at all, you start resting the Bryce Sensabaugh of the world, right? Who, at this point, is a third-year player, is a growing player, still considered a prospect, but he's still like, he's a player. He's a rotation player right now. Najee Marshall, great example, very good player, right? So once you start resting Najee Marshall and those types of players to play bullshit two-way players, 35, 40 minutes a game, giving them 30 shot attempts. Taylor Hendricks led the Grizzlies in shot attempts the other night, by the way, which is preposterous. That's when it becomes more of like a, wow, this team is super tanking. So I don't think that, which has been done for decades, playing bullshit players to try to lose games. That has happened for decades. That is worse than the Jazz saying, we're going to rest our starters in the fourth quarter because every game from here on out for the Jazz is a preseason game. That would have been true regardless of the larger implications and value to a team for tanking, which I'm going to get into now. The value to a team of tanking is irrespective of the idea that, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs. The rest of the season is preseason for us. This is a lost season. We're bad. We got to gear up for next year. So save me with the holier than thou attitude about the Jazz being somehow a special version of tanking. So yeah, Memphis the other night, they absolutely did the same thing that the Jazz did, but it just got less attention because they've already traded Desmond Bane obviously last year, or in the summer. Jaren Jackson Jr. got traded to the Jazz, and John Morant is injured. But the Memphis Grizzlies, in their game against the Warriors, their 5-man lineup, you take a look at that one, and I might pull it up here if it doesn't take me too long. Their 5-man lineup to close the game against the Warriors was bullshit. And they blew a huge lead against the Warriors and lost the game. They also didn't intentionally... So the game, they were down 1 point at the very end of the game with the timeout remaining. And they have about 5 or 6 seconds left to get a game-winning shot off. They do an inbounds play, they get the ball, and the player with the ball got stuck. Couldn't get a shot attempt off. They could have called timeout and didn't. Memphis did the identical thing the Jazz did. They intentionally did not try to win that game. They did not use all of their tools at their disposal to win that game. We didn't hear a peep about the Grizzlies. It's just save me from the conversation of it's so farcical what the Jazz are doing. It's affecting the integrity of the game. When they close the game with Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Cody Williams, Ace Bailey, and Kyle Filipowski. These are all real players who get rotation minutes and who need minutes to grow. They are rightfully treating these games like extended preseason and training camp development games. Why should the Jazz be playing Lauri Markkanen in 38 minutes? Oh, it's bad for the fans. The Jazz are shitty either way. I think the average fan will be just fine if the Jazz don't play the Stars in the fourth quarter. And I think it's much worse fan experience for we get to these March games and these teams. The Jazz are going to be included in this, by the way. My point is not about the issue of whether this is a good or bad thing. It's about the unnecessary spotlight on the Jazz. We're going to get to March, and all of these shitty teams are going to play 5-man lineups, and you might be able to recognize 2 of the starters. Jazz signed a new 2-way player. Bet you don't know who he is, right? Like Blake Hinson. He's going to play. You're suddenly going to have... the Jazz have an open roster spot, too. The Jazz are going to rotate a bunch of 10-day players, and they're all going to play 20 minutes. Maybe even more. The Jazz also should be finding, as I mentioned in our last show, when you're building a $170 million team out of 4 players, you're going to need some players around the margins. You're going to need new Royce O'Neals, new Joe Ingles. Well, it's time to treat the spring like extended tryouts, extended training camp, extended preseason. Find new players. And I just think that the attention given on the Jazz for something that every team does is ridiculous. I mentioned the Raptors and the Grizzlies as 2 within the past year examples of the identical thing happening. There's a little bit more attention on the Jazz because they just traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. I'll kind of say oh, it's a little bit natural to pay attention to this a little bit more for the Jazz. But the Wizards get a pass. Trae Young's not going to play a single minute this year, probably. And we give him a pass on Anthony Davis because Anthony Davis has been injury prone his entire career and he's got all these injuries and that's his title. Jaren Jackson Jr., not the healthiest cat. Lauri Markkanen, not the healthiest dude. Are they special? My indignance will continue. I think all this blows over after the All-Star break. Everyone will focus on how shitty the All-Star game was, how shitty the dunk contest was, how shitty the 3-point contest was. There's probably somebody thinking right now, Mark is cussing too much on this podcast, and I'm going to leave a comment and a review about it. That's fine. The 3-point contest is Bobby Portis in it. That'll be interesting. Apparently shooting 45% from three this year. We'll get into focusing on the playoff rate. There's such interesting things in the NBA too that are happening in play-in tournaments and good teams and how teams fit together and trade deadline non-movers and movers. And there's such interesting NBA stories out there that for the Jazz resting the players in the fourth quarter of a game to that get national attention just feels like there's something more sinister at play as to like why are we taking a giant dump on the Jazz for something that happens. And I try not to invoke other podcasts too much where I agree or disagree, but sometimes it's useful. One thing that raised my eyebrow that I didn't think was possible, but I actually think is a thing. David Locke said that he thinks it would be wise for Jazz management, whether it be the Angels or Ryan Smith himself, to get in contact with ESPN or Bobby Marks about his statements. That was a bridge too far. Obviously, no one is trying to chill speech as like a government protected thing here. But if you're going to talk about the Jazz in such a denigrating manner, then that gets a phone call. And Bobby Marks isn't one to rely on sources for a lot of things, right? He's not a newsbreaker. I think he's a really good cap analyst as far as like, hey, this is a trade that happened. And he'll help break down the discrete things. Sometimes he might have like some cap context, I'm sure, at teams to figure out exactly how a trade was constructed or how a free agent signing was constructed. But he doesn't need to have his relationships to do his job. So this isn't like a, hey, you better speak better next time or we won't give you your sources. But there are ways to make that that conversation a little bit more straight. And I wonder if that's the case, because when somebody like that in a national spotlight says something like that, all of a sudden the NBA is saying like, oh, this is reaching national media attention. We have to do something not about tanking, about the Utah Jazz. And now the Utah Jazz are getting unfairly hit. You want to talk about integrity of the game? How about Kawhi Leonard and aspiration? I can't wait for the All-Star break to be over. The All-Star break is happening in Los Angeles at the Clippers' new arena. I can't, and I haven't listened to it yet, but Pablo Torre just dropped another podcast invoking aspiration and Kawhi Leonard and Steve Ballmer bullshit issues. So can't wait for that to result in a fart of a punishment, giving Kawhi Leonard an extra $20, $30 million or $10 million or whatever it was to get around the salary cap. Get me out of here. Integrity of the game. Why is this such an issue in the NBA? The reason this becomes an NBA storyline every year is a lot simpler than people make it out to be. The impact of a single star player on an NBA franchise is completely outsized and enormous compared to other sports leagues. Particularly when you couple it with the fact that the likelihood of those star players being acquired via the top 2-3 picks in the NBA draft is very, very, very predictive. That's where your star players are coming from. So just talking about the major sports in general. With the NFL, there are just too many players on a roster and too many players playing at the same time, and there are too many injuries across your players for any one player to have that outsized an impact, except for obviously the quarterbacks. And the quarterback, you look at who the best quarterbacks are in the NFL. Yeah, a lot of them came with the top 2 or 3 picks, but a lot of them came with just using your first round draft pick wisely or trading up to get that quarterback. Like if you're a bad football team, you have the 2nd or 3rd pick in the NFL draft, but you have a good quarterback who got injured that year or something like that, or you have a rookie quarterback that you're already kind of build, you had a bad year, you don't need to draft another quarterback, well, you'll freely trade with another team to do so. And it's easier for teams to trade up to get those quarterbacks or to get the quarterback they want to in the NFL to get that player who has the outsized impact. And the NFL has their own problems with like, hey, you kind of need a quarterback on their rookie salary to build a team around him, because once your quarterback makes $50 million or $40 million, it's hard to build a team around. So, and because you need to fill out your roster with so many other players who also need their own star quality, tanking is just not going to be a thing in the NFL unless you like desperately need a quarterback. And even then, players in the NFL play through their injuries because of their non-guaranteed contracts, and coaches are also frequently coaching for their damn jobs. So if you get into week 16, 17, 18 of the regular season in the NFL and you're a bad football team, if you can play, you play. And the coaches are always going to try and show that they can win a football game. And if they play a bunch of bad players and lose the football game, because the sample size is so small with only 17 games, the coaches will only, if they put out bad game tape, it looks bad on the coaches. It looks bad on the players playing. All players want to show that they are worth their next non-guaranteed contract. So there's other incentives in the NFL combined with, hey, we don't have any one player typically driving the success of our winning. If we can win with an average quarterback if we fill out the rest of the roster. If we get a star quarterback, there's ways to getting a star quarterback than just having the first pick in the draft. Baseball, the time to value from when you're drafted first, second, third overall to being a productive baseball player can be years and years and years. And similar to football, it's very, very hard for one player to have an outsized impact on winning, right? Like Bryce Harper is not like at the time when he was drafted and a couple years thereafter, he's not single-handedly driving you a bunch of wins. He can have a bunch of wins over replacement and that sort of thing and be a very awesome player, but you need to fill out the rest of the lineup. Baseball also has a much bigger problem than the NBA, my friends. In baseball, at least 5 to 8 teams every year tell their fans, we don't care about you. We don't care about winning. I live in Denver. I love going to the Rockies Stadium. The Rockies are doing everything but just telling you directly, we don't care about you. We will not sign good players, and as soon as we have good players, we might keep one on the roster to sell some jerseys, and other than that, we are not going to spend money to try to win. We want to be as cheap as possible. So talk about tanking at the end of the season. How about teams tanking from game one? Hockey's probably the closest thing to the NBA. But in hockey, even the very, very, very best players, the way that the sport is designed, they're playing a third of the game. Right? In some critical Game 7 playoff matchups, you might see a defenseman reach like 40% or something like that, right? If you're a Utah Mammoth fan, you've been trying to pay attention to them a little bit. I think in some crazy circumstances, you will have some defensemen play like half the game or something. And obviously, goaltenders are a separate discussion, but even goaltenders can be very random. You're not relying on a goaltender typically to rely on driving wins night after night after night. That's just the nature of goalies in the NHL. We have had some amazingly special ones in the past, but they're not like quarterbacks, right? But even your very, very, very star players, your nightly point scorers, your Nathan McKinnons, your Connor McDavids, takes them a couple years to get up to speed for one, and two, they're only playing a third of the game. You need to round out the rest of your roster in hockey, or you're still going to be a bad hockey team. You need to have a good defense pairing. You need to have a second line that is worth a shit. You can get away with having a third and fourth line that isn't worth anything. But if you're pairing Nathan McKinnon with a bunch of scrubs and AHL players, you're not winning. If you pair Connor McDavid with 0 good defensemen, you might eke out an 8th seed and see what happens, but you're not winning that much. You need additional stuff. And in the NBA, if you can get 36 minutes of a first-team All-NBA player, you're winning 40 games. That's it. All you have to do is get some competence for the rest of the minutes. Maybe you get a few more wins and you're a 4 seed. And if you get second team All-NBA players and third team All-NBA players, they're also pretty close to that. You become a championship team when you can get 2 stars together, of course. But the fact that but you can modulate your team over time, right? So the idea of having 1 star being necessary to win a title. Also, having a star is not necessary to win a baseball title or a hockey title or a football title in the same way it is for the NBA. Even if the Pacers won last year, which they came so close to doing, you could say, hey, they had a couple All-NBA players on their team. And that was considered oh my God, can you believe the Pacers? The Pacers got that close. Everyone was stunned they got that far. A real rags to riches story, the Indiana Pacers. We were stunned that they made it. Every single round that they won, we were like, oh my God. Their amazing cardiac cat style victories, the Tyrese Halliburton 3 that bounced off the back rim and went to outer space and came down and fell through the hoop. It was like a divine intervention for the Pacers last year that this scrappy team with a couple All-NBA players on it managed to make the finals. In the NBA, you need a star to make it. That's also why a lot of us, while I'm excited, I think a lot of us are pessimistic about this current roster construction for the Jazz. You don't have an All-NBA player, how are you going to be useful? How are you going to be a very competent team? And the Jazz are trying to build a Pacers-like squad of, well, we have All-NBA talent in Markkanen and Jackson. We think we can elevate them with a better team around them. Keontae George has shown us something. Ace Bailey is an All-NBA talent, even if he's much earlier on the curve than proven talents like Markkanen and Jackson. But there are concerns about the Jazz being a $170 million team without a star. But in the NBA, to win a title, you need, if you have that holy shit top 5, top 10 player, you're in much better shape. Much better shape. Particularly because, for 2 reasons, these amazing, prodigious talents, Cooper Flagg, Victor Wembanyama, when you hit the right draft, and it seems like this draft is not quite a Wembanyama draft or a Flagg draft, but because it has 3 All-NBA talents at the top, with DeBonsa and Boozer and Peterson, and maybe even the dude out of UNC. I'm not a college guy, I'm forgetting his name. Caleb Miller, I think it is. Just broke his hand or his arm or something. I lost my train of thought there for a minute, but the idea of, like, you can get one of these star players, they are going to become productive value add, like winning players in like year 2. Cooper Flagg is going to be a winning player next year. Victor Wembanyama is an MVP candidate. He's not playing enough games to be actually considered for MVP this year, but when he plays, it's, oh my God. LeBron James, winning player in year 2. Arguably a winning player in year 1. To get these types of players, Anthony Edwards, losing player in year 1. I think it took him until his 3rd year, but it's really quick. While these players are still on their rookie contracts, they can be winning players that you build around immediately. The other part of it is that, and I mentioned this on the last show about how to build a team salary-wise, when these players are that good, their max contracts dwarf their actual value in money to performance. Their max contracts are $40 million, $50 million, but compared, if you're trying to actually grade it out and you don't have max contracts, these are $70, $80, $90 million players. If you didn't have max contracts in the NBA, Luka's next contract would be $70, $80 million. You'd rather have Luka than by himself, right, at $80 million than Jaren Jackson Jr. and 3 $10 million players. Like Jaren Jackson Jr. and 3 rotation-ish, like 8th, 9th, 10th. Jaren Jackson Jr. and 3 edge of rotation guys is worse than Luka Doncic by himself. single-handedly driving win. He's an $80 million player. But he's only allowed to make 50. So it is so much easier to build a championship team if you have an apex predator. And it is outsized how predictive it is to get one of those apex predators with the top 3 pick in a good draft. And there's a lot of good NBA drafts, right? It's more rare than not that you get a Ricochet draft where the top pick is kind of like, not so great, than it is a draft like we're going to come up to. I think it is equally rare that you get a Wembanyama draft or a flag draft. But you get a lot of drafts like we're going to have coming up where like the top 3 picks, like the top pick every year is pretty reliably a dude. And so teams are incentivized to get the dude to get the apex predator. So I think flattening lottery odds is a really good solution. I think it's a little underrated how successful that's been because of the sickening, vomit-inducing taste of the Mavericks ineptly managing their team and getting Cooper Flag. Of the Spurs being this magic wonderkin where they tanked to get Tim Duncan, by the way. They hadn't, sure, David Robinson injured, totally makes sense. They also gave a lot of guys some surgeries that year and made sure that they were absolute dump shit garbage to make sure that they were going to get Tim Duncan, or at least give them the best odds to get Tim Duncan. So and then they come back and then they get Wembanyama and Castle and Harper. Like their lottery luck is sickening. The Cavaliers, it was only because of their ineptitude that they weren't able to really capitalize on their lottery luck. But then it led to LeBron James and Kyrie Irving and a title, right? Like these things matter. But I think the flattened lottery odds have had their intended effect of just like, you can't tank your way to the 1 pick. You can tank your way to a 14% chance at it. I think that is good value. But all of that intro is to say that is why the NBA's problem is unique. And if you're ever talking to your weird uncle about why the NBA is just full of tankers or whatever, you just point to the fact that there's only 15 players on a roster. Only 9 players play on a good team every given night, maybe even 8, sometimes 10, but usually 8 to 9 players play on a good team in the playoffs. So the impact of 1 player is what drives winning a lot of the times, sometimes 2. And if you're really kick-ass, you have 3 amazing players, and then you're the Thunder, and you're basically a shoo-in for the title unless something goes wrong. And so the outsized impact of a player is what drives tanking in the NBA. So solutions. I love taking solutions because I really like that people are trying to improve the league. I think that's always something that I think the NBA has the best fans in the world out of any league for this. We're always, when we see a problem, we want to address it. I think baseball fans too are also big on this, and it's just baseball has a bigger headwinds with ownership and stuff like that just won't change. But I think NBA fans have they could have a big impact if they can, I don't know, I'm speaking kind of conjecturally here, but I just think that, and maybe this is my own inherent bias speaking, I think that it can matter. Our ideas and the things we come up with and the things that get traction. And with how much of the league's focus has been on international bullshit and gambling partnerships and expansion, it feels like, and with Adam Silver's entire presence ever since the Donald Sterling incident, it seems like Silver's primary motivation is short-term money instead of long-term stability. And he's losing the concepts for, well, what will get us the most short-term money now? What will get my current 30 NBA owners as much money as possible in the short term instead of preserving the stability of the NBA? So I think the tanking thing is a real thing because of the outsized impact of these star players. But we have to keep one thing straight before we start talking about ideas. Without some sort of preferential treatment for bad teams, bad teams, especially small market teams, which matter and make a lot of money for the NBA, don't have a way of getting better. They're forced to make trades, of course. They can. That is also something to do, but the draft picks are also part of those trades, right? So you can't dilute the value of a small market team's draft pick too much, or else they can't trade them for the star players because free agents aren't going there. And with sign and trade mechanisms, star players who enter free agency, like Austin Reeves, are not walking. They don't enter free agency thinking, well, I'm Austin Reeves. I'm going to get a truckload of money this summer, but the only teams I can sign with are the Lakers because they have my bird rights that allow them to go over the salary cap. They also have a lot of salary cap space, but for the story, like, yes, you can always sign with your own team if you have your bird rights, which is 3+ years on your contract or 10-year with your team, with the same team. Or to a team with the available cap space. That's not true. Like, if Austin Reeves really wanted to sign with any team that didn't have cap space, that team with cap space would probably need to give up some assets, but the Lakers can do a sign and trade. You sign Austin Reeves to that contract and you trade him to the team that he wants to go to. Lakers get an asset or two for their trouble from the team that is getting that player, but the players still get to choose where they want. They're not choosing the small market team with cap space just because they have cap space. Occasionally a good player will sign with a small market. Not the norm, not something to expect. So the draft remains bad teams and small market teams' only avenue to championships. It's that or constantly trading a paperclip into a house via the trade market, which is a much, 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 much harder thing to do. Frankly, I think the Oklahoma City Thunder have done an amazing job with drafting and asset management. This whole thing doesn't get off the ground if their Paul George trade, which is a product of something else, by the way, if their Paul George trade was not predicated on nailing a good prospect in SGA turning into one of the best players in basketball history. By the way, the Thunder tanked their ass off. SGA played 40 games or whatever it was during their tank year, right? Oh, forgot about that. Did we? Al Horford didn't play for them for an entire year. Oh, but we never called the Thunder out. Oh, this is a Jazz problem. Anyways, so solutions, I don't think you can just be like, take away options for bad teams to get better. The bad teams need an opportunity to get better. And the draft is pretty much the only way of doing that. However, I do think the idea of something like abolish the draft, which I have an idea on this in a minute. The idea of abolish the draft sounds so antithetical to how American sports fans think that it would never get off the ground. But I challenge you to think about a world where the draft didn't exist, because it doesn't have to be the case. So my first idea to solve a lot of this, before we get into quirks around the draft, and there's many people who have given tanking suggestions, so I'm not going to give an exhaustive list. But my first idea is actually not about the draft itself or tanking. It's about getting rid of max salaries. I think if you remove max salaries in the NBA, it has a cascading effect down to parity for the league. Where that one player who can have that outsized impact on winning is also harder to build around. Now, you institute max salaries because you save owners from themselves. Oh, we paid this guy way too much money and now we're screwed, and we'll never recover from this financial mistake. That's why the salary cap exists. That's why the first apron and second apron, that you rake the players over the coals the last CBA negotiations. You got your goddamn first and second aprons. The luxury tax penalties are obscene. You've already told the players that you will do whatever it takes to not spend money on them. And the Players Association, they accept max salaries as something that is good for the NBA, and perhaps it allows more bad contracts for the Acapurtos of the world to get done, but it reduces the value of the super duper star players. And if you keep the same salary cap, but Luka Doncic is making $70 or $80 million instead of 50, you have to make tougher roster decisions, like about Austin Reeves, right? And so Austin Reeves goes to maybe a team that they're on the up and coming swing, and they could use a $40 million player like Austin Reeves. If you remove max contracts, these star players who hit, like the Wembanyamas and the Flags, they become harder to build around. And I'm not exactly thrilled about the second apron or these massive luxury tax payments, because I think it's going to be a real sad story for the Oklahoma City Thunder to have to break up their team eventually because their owner's too cheap. That's going to happen. Once these contracts start kicking in and they get into super duper luxury tax payments, which hasn't hit yet because of, Jalen Williams is on a rookie contract. Chet Holmgren's on a rookie contract. But once you remove the max salary limitations on who these players are, we're going to spend $240 million on those three players? Well, I don't know. It reduces the inherent value of that super duper star player, and maybe building a team like the Jazz is a more viable path to a championship. Building a team around a bunch of $20 to $50 million players instead of one $80 million player. I think that would reduce the incentive to tank for a lot of teams. Second thing, why is tanking such a big issue this year, and is there a solution here around the middle? The tanking I think becomes especially egregious when you have teams trying to tank in the middle. The Sixers were abhorrent about tanking last year, and they didn't even tank enough to get into the protected range of their pick. And the Sixers got horrifically lucky to keep their pick by moving up to get Vijay Edgecombe. Horrifically lucky. But when they figured out that they weren't going to make the playoffs, or if they were going to make the playoffs, it was going to be with a shitty roster, with Embiid injured and not really a whole lot behind him. I think Paul George was also injured. They decided to completely tank their ass off to get in the protected range of their pick. The Sixers were a joke last year. Not because they were trying to get the first pick, but they were just trying to save their pick at all. I think it was top 9 protected or top 10 protected. And they were trying to get down to 9th or 10th, right? Just a gross tank job. The Jazz and Wizards right now are going to pull off horrific tank jobs the rest of the year to keep their top 8 protected pick. The Golden State Warriors, when they got Harrison Barnes, they went 3-17 to close out the year and played basically they would play entire games with just 5 or 6 players to try to lose games, including the very last game which ended up allowing them to keep their pick, which was owed to the Utah Jazz, and got them Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes still playing in the NBA. Never an all-star. Very good player. Helped them win a title. No questions about it. So the issue of why we have so many tanking teams is not the Jazz and Wizards trying to get the number 1 overall pick. They're trying to get the number 6 pick at the least. So they're trying to tank and tank and tank to keep their pick that they don't trade. The solution is get rid of these middle protections. So that in any given year, if you're only allowed to, if you remove all protections, or if you just have allowed protections for the top 3 picks, this draft pick is top 3 protected, then you don't have 10 teams who look at themselves saying, oh, we're not going to make the playoffs. Like, we're all going to tank because we need to keep the 5th, 6th, 7th pick, 8th pick, whatever. You just have the bottom 3 to 5 teams looking around saying, oh man, we are real garbage. Guys, we are such garbage. Teams are, because of the flattened lottery odds, teams are not tanking 6 through 11 to get an extra 1% at the top pick. They're tanking to keep their pick based on protections on trades they made previously. So don't allow those trades, man. If the Jazz, I promise you this, because I I know enough about the Jazz to tell you this. If the Jazz didn't owe their top 8 protected pick this year, they'd still be like loosely trying. I bet you Jaren Jackson would still get his surgery because like they're not exactly trying to win the games. But they might have closed out those Orlando-Miami games. They might play Lauri Markkanen a little bit more than they otherwise would have. They certainly wouldn't be putting forth what will come in March and April, these really horrific lineups with a bunch of two-way players. You certainly won't see that. Like, they actually might try because they're not... They're going to try next year, and the idea of having the 6th best lottery odds versus the 9th best lottery odds is not really that impactful because of the flattening. But 6 through 9 is actually very, very important if you're trying to keep a top 8 protected pick, which is why they're tanking so hard. So reduced protections, I think, is actually a very viable idea because it reduces the amount of teams who are actually tanking in every given year to just the 3 or 4 or 5 inherently shitty teams. You would just have the Kings, the Pacers, the Nets. Even the Nets are a little frisky right now because they have Michael Porter Jr., who's probably not playing the rest of the year. Won't talk about him. Oh, he's injury prone. He has back issues. I'm forgetting one other bad team off the top of my head. But I think you'd only have 3 to 5 teams having that issue. My final grand thought, and this is my bigger thought, is I am a fan of abolishing the draft, but I have an idea. I think that the worst teams every year it's actually every team, but starting with the worst teams in the NBA, they are given more cap space or salary cap exceptions, if you will, to spend on rookies. So like I haven't mathed this out, but let's say the worst team in the NBA gets $25 million to spend on rookies. And the best team in the NBA, the Thunder, gets $1 million. Let's make it easy. Let's call it the worst team in the NBA gets 30 and the best team gets 1. You can spend it all on one guy. You can spend it on multiple guys. And it goes down from 30 to 1. I think there should be more math done here to see exactly what would be an impactful amount between 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. And players are free agents. These rookies are free agents. But these rookies would have to make a decision between two things. They would have to, among many things, but they would decide, do I want to go to the worst team and get $30 million? Or do I want to go to a better team or a team in a preferred market? Oh, the worst team is the Dallas Mavericks. I don't want to go to Dallas. I want to go to Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles only has $40 million and Dallas has 30. And let's say you have a decision where it's based on opportunity, right? Where, well, I'm a star center. I'm for sure the number 1 pick in a draft. But the team with the most cap rookie space, the $30 million team, they just signed a star center in rookie free agency last year. So I would go to that team and be competing with him, and I wouldn't have opportunity. I'm going to go to a different team. I'll take less money for more opportunity for that team. So you're allowing rookies a choice here, but the worst teams have their thumb on the scale for what they can offer those players. And to give the teams a little bit more of an edge, the reason I really believe strongly that the bad teams need an edge. I just want if you open it up to the fact that you might not get what you want, I think will reduce tanking. But I think you can also add some thumbs on the scale to treat it more like a matching system or like a med school matching system where the teams also rank the players that they want to do. It doesn't have to be like, hey, we're going to do free agent signings and have you ink a deal. It's going to be the teams ranking their players what they want to do. Like if you're the worst team in the NBA, or let's say you're the 10th worst team in the NBA and you have $20 million to spend, right? You can rank the players that you're interested in. You might not, if you're the 10th worst team, you might not rank Victor Wembanyama first. Because maybe you just know from everything going on, that Wembanyama is not going to choose your team. So you choose different players first. You're saying, I'm going to give my $20 million to a different player. And the teams are also ranking the players that they want to bid on and how much money they would spend on that player. And that ranking has weight. And if you think this is too complicated, this is how school matching systems work. Students rank the schools. Schools pick the player, pick the incoming students based on their testing scores and based on their GPAs and things like that. Like if you're a shitty student and you rank Harvard where you want to go to medical school, well, Harvard's not choosing you. And if you're a star pupil and you don't say you want to go to Harvard, well, you don't end up at Harvard. Have your pick of the litter. And I think for like if you're the very worst 3-5 teams in the NBA, the only way you don't get the players you select is if they rank you last. Like if you're the worst team in the NBA and you have your $30 million, and so long as you rank Cooper Flagg first and you give him $30 million, you get Cooper Flagg unless he ranks your team 30th. Like in no event am I going to that direction. So I think you can put enough weight on the scale so that the worst teams, so that the rookies aren't entirely deciding their fate, but the rookies still can say, these teams with a ton of rookie cap exception, I don't want to play for them. I want to play for these other teams, and figure out how you weight that ranking system. It gives the players more agency in it. It still gives the worst teams a big edge on it. And then you can still have the NBA draft where both the teams and the players show up to the NBA draft and you figure out your match. Like you should watch videos of, I know med school is one example, but like watching videos of students figuring out what school they're going to go to. Like they're not necessarily just acceptance letters. It's like you open it up, you figure out like where you're going to school. It's pretty exciting. You have a whole NBA draft, and Cooper Flagg is going to, and then you figure out who they're going to, and then it's revealed after the fact, like, okay, what were the bids? What was the money? And like, oh, the Suns got Kamal Malawach because they bid $20 million on Kamal Malawach, and to find out every other team didn't bid anything on Kamal Malawach. If you do free agency bidding in fantasy leagues, it's a little similar to that, right? You get to see the waiver report afterwards. You say like, oh, you bid $60 on a free agent, and you find out that all your league mates bid $3, and you're like, oh, I guess I didn't need to bid that high for the free agent. So this is not an infallible plan. No anti-tanking mechanism is. It's complicated. I understand that. I think it's the surest way to eschew tanking, because all you're doing to lose games at the end of the season is get more cap exception space by a small enough magnitude. Or like, oh, I might get, if I lose 5 games at the end of the year, I might get $2 million more in free agency spending. Is that really going to affect what a rookie decides about you? Maybe not. They might choose a better team or more opportunity or a better market. So that's why I think it definitely kills the tanking thing, because I don't think a team is trying to tank all the way to get the most cap exception space. So I think we have to think novel thoughts about this. I have icky feelings about teams who are the ideas of, well, after a given date, to determine lottery order, wins count instead of losses. So after March 1st, you get additional ping pong balls in the lottery for every game you win. I think this is problematic for 2 reasons, and the reason I kind of feel icky about them. One, the players on the court are playing to lose their jobs. Yes, playing successfully and winning can help you get additional jobs later on, but ultimately you know that the goal of this team, we are trying to win this game so that they can get a better player than me. I think there are some perverse incentives involved there. The other aspect of this is I think bad teams are actually bad. And no matter what you tell the Sacramento Kings, if they try their ass off the rest of the year, they are free trade organic suck. They're not artificial suck. They actually suck at this. And I think if you told the Sacramento Kings, in order to get lottery balls, you have to try and win. I'm not sure they would have approached last offseason any differently. I think they looked at Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis and said, well, if we get into a bad situation at the end of the year, well, we at least have those players to try to win some games at the end of the year. And they are just genuinely shitty at basketball with a bad coach and bad support players. And I think a win incentive lottery standings, like after a certain date, I think unfairly punishes naturally bad teams who rely on the draft to improve their team. I also don't think it fixes the tanking problem, because teams will just start tanking earlier. Kevin Pelton has a fun idea about we have the win incentive idea, but every year you don't know when. Like, you do a random drawing for when the wins start, and you don't find out until after the season. Could be November 30th, could be March 1st. And if teams don't know, then they'll just say, we're not going to try to manipulate standings. We'll just try organically. I think you'd still see teams like Utah do what they did. And say, look, we don't know which games matter, which games don't. We are still going to prioritize development for the Ace Baileys and Cody Williams and whatever, and rest Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen for the fourth quarters. I don't think it necessarily solves a lot of that, and I mentioned the perverse incentives before. So not a whole lot of great solutions on the draft itself. My actual big thoughts are, I think the flattened lottery odds are good enough. I don't think you got to mess with those. I think we need more data on it. 2, these mid-lottery protections are creating a bigger swath of tanking teams, so it becomes more of a spotlight on the entire tanking issue as a whole instead of the bottom 5 teams. You have more teams this year that are tanking because of these mid-round protections. You remove those mid-round protections as a thing you can trade. I think you have more teams like the Wizards and the Wizards might bring Trae Young and Anthony Davis back for 15 games to see how that works. You might see the Jazz try and say, hey, Jaren Jackson, can you at least play until March, right? And get a few more games in before your surgery. I think that actually might have the incentive you want. The spotlight isn't as big when it's just 3 to 5 teams. You have 8 teams tanking. Now you got Memphis and Dallas tanking down, right? And I just don't think you'd have that big of a deal if we didn't have all of these teams tanking. And then reducing max salary or removing max salaries to make it so that your star all-NBA player not only does he have an outsized impact on winning on the court, but he has an outsized impact on how easy it is to build a roster around him. If you get a top 5 player, great. It's really hard to build around him unless he takes a discount. So, obviously, I'm suggesting nothing to do with the lottery odds, so don't have to. I think removing protections is an easy one. That's an easy, low-hanging fruit. I don't think, obviously, nothing's going to happen with max salaries until the next CBA negotiation, and that's just unlikely to change. That's not going to change. It'd be do I want the NBA to try anything? I actually think no. I think the flattened lottery odds are enough. And we're just going to have this conversation every year because of what I said at the outset, that these players have an outsized impact. There's no way of getting around it. I'm sorry. Unless you take drastic action on the concept of a draft, this issue is just always going to be pervasive. So hopefully I was angry enough for you about the spotlight on the Jazz, the red dot on the Jazz. I just think it's been ridiculous up to this point, and I love the Jazz. I know I'm rooting for good lottery luck coming up. I haven't changed my tune from the beginning of the season that I think the Jazz are really in no danger of losing their pick, because I think they will be. I mean, what I was saying back in October, November was like, guys, promise me the Jazz are going to be very much tanking at the end of the season. Well, we're here. Like, this is what I'm saying. Now we're getting to a point where I didn't give a shit about the wins that happened in November because I knew the team would be in a good position to lose a bunch of games now. The Pelicans are going to rise up the standings because they don't have their pick. They're incentivized to keep playing their good players to the extent they have good players. And the Jazz will have plenty of ways to lose games. I think the teams around them are also kind of in the same questionable bad part enough. We just got to stay below Dallas and Memphis, and I think that's easy to do. So I'm just not worried. My tune hasn't changed from the beginning of the season. The Jazz are not trying to get a top 3 pick. They're just trying to make sure that they don't lose their pick, which was kind of how they thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. So not worried. And that's it. A lot of words on it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed me being angry. Look, next year we'll have I'll be very angry about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s foul trouble and rebounding or something, right? So it'll be more fun things to be mad about in the offseason and next year. But for now, I wasn't planning on talking about it at all and just being above it. But you start invoking who the Jazz are as an organization with integrity versus the other bullshit going on in the NBA, and I think you're out of pocket. So I got to say something. All right, my friends, this has been Salt City Hoops. I am Mark Pereira. Please come find me on the comment sections or on Blue Sky or whatever. Let me know what's happening. See if you agree, disagree. Give me your own taking thoughts. I don't care. Let's go. All-Star break. Hope you have a great one and a great Valentine's Day. Have a great night. See you next time.